Welcome back, South Philly Sauce and Audacy Original, brought to you by 94 WIP and Jack Daniels. Ashlyn, Sullivan, Al Morganti here with you later on in the week, recapping a couple games for the Flyers. The Flyers currently on a 3-game losing streak, losing to the Wild, the Red Wings, and the Kings on Thursday evening. That game back in Philadelphia, Detroit game as well, and on the road. And the Flyers had just seen Detroit. They played a good game against them, saw them a week later, lost them in Detroit. And overall, I think the easiest game to recap as of right now is that Kings game, because it's kind of similar styles to what we saw in Detroit, Al, where they're in it, right? They're in it for 2 periods. It's back and forth. They get down, they score a goal, the comeback kids that we've seen all season, but then really an awful third period buries them in both games.
Yeah, I think what you see in Ashlyn is a team that, at the beginning of the season, people said would struggle to make the playoffs, and you're seeing why. I mean, they go through stretches, and then it's kind of like they have to play their A game almost every time every game that they're going to win, or at least a B+ game, because they just don't have the luxury of being good enough to make mistakes and overcome them. You can try; they've done it a few times, as you mentioned, coming back. But boy, when they're not all going, especially on defense, you really can see why they're not a premier team in the league yet. So there were a lot of problems that came up here. Sometimes you can overcome them just with effort, but there are times when the other team, like Kings, are a pretty good team, and Kopitar is an exceptional player. You make mistakes, and they make you pay dearly. And one soft goal leads to something that you can't overcome.
Yeah, you mentioned that soft goal, especially against the Kings. We saw that with Kolosov, where he goes to stop the puck, he goes to cover the puck, and it slips past him. And it's really unfortunate because that's kind of when the game starts to turning and momentum slips. And you look at that, Kolosov, 22 years old, developing a young goalie. You're going to go through stuff like that this season, sadly.
Yeah, Kolosov, Fedotov before. I mean, these are guys that in a perfect world where your depth chart is where you want it to be, these guys are probably, getting their chops somewhere else in a lower league. We already seen this with Kolosov. He didn't want to play down there, and the Flyers kind of left in the lurch with their goaltending after last year. So, I mean, it's not just that either. I mean, Sam Ersson, good as he's been, has let in some soft goals. And with this team, you hate to point at the goaltender all the time. It's just a horrible job, because when you make a great save, it's a great save. But a soft goal just is like, it's like not right. Like a great save is here, but a bad goal, then the value's way up here. And I think Sam Ersson's given up some of them since he's come back too. So there are like crunch times in games where the Flyers have been able to get through them previously, and we've seen the last few they haven't been able to do that. And the LA game particularly was that was where you were looking for them to have kind of a rebound, to kind of like, okay, we played a couple of bad ones. Let's get this one, and let's get it out of our system and turn things around. So it was a little worrisome to me that it all kind of fell apart in a game where you were looking for a rebound.
Right, and I think what's most worrisome right now is what was once the Flyers' strength a month ago was this defense. It was playing very well. The pairs were set. You felt very good about it. And unfortunately, with Cam York's play, he was a healthy scratch against the Kings. He had 2 not good games against the Wild and the Red Wings, so sat for the Kings. And when Cam York is out, it shifts up everything. We knew that going into the Kings game, that the pairs were going to be shifted because Cam York wasn't playing. But you really saw, I think, this Blue Line Corps, a lot of breakdowns in that Kings game. And it just really felt like the defense wasn't in ideal roles because of this. But we understand Torts' more big picture method to the madness, for lack of a better term, that understanding when Cam York's out, it's going to look a little unorganized. But with the way he's playing, you kind of knew this was coming.
Yeah, the problem is when he was out previously, they did okay.
Yeah.
they made up for it. Yeah, and I think what you see is why it's why the cliche when coaches say, well, that's a hard position. It's a really hard position. And you come up and you play well for a while. And it's also a position where sometimes the big mistakes are obvious. York sends a pass over, gets intercepted, it ends up the other way. But there are also like positioning things that go wrong. And it's a defense that looks okay at times, but it's not a defense that can slip even a little bit. Like you're asking Sanheim almost every night to be like the star of the game. And yeah, he makes a lot of money and he's been really good. But like every night, that's where we're going to be with
Can't
this.
take a night off. Yeah.
He's like, he has to be this huge eraser in front of when the goaltender's soft too. So at times he's got to be an enormous eraser. Mm-hmm. So you squeezed enough out of that toothpaste, right? Everything there's been used on Sanheim. And then you look ahead, Ristolainen. The question is that who he is, or is he playing a little bit above where you expected him to be? York, we mentioned in our last podcast, we said, boy, he doesn't look like himself since coming back from injury, especially that Minnesota game. I thought, oh, Lord, what's going on here? And sure enough, Torts, pipes him after the big mistake in a previous game. So, in Detroit. So you've got a defense that you're seeing why it's so hard to develop young defensemen to come in and not make those critical errors. I still don't quite understand the Andre thing. I think they play better with him in the lineup, at least offensively pushing it up. But you can see this, you have a coach on the one hand, people like when he says we're going to live with the mistakes. Then you see the mistakes and you say, oh my God, how can we live with that? Well, you kind of have to live with that if you're going to have that kind of young D.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. You can't have it all.
Well, which is why I think when people say, well, how come they keep going to Zamula? Because it doesn't look well, because sometimes it's not like Andre can go flying up or whatever, and you make a mistake that leads to something going the other way. And I spoke with him. When was it? Tuesday, I think it was, after whatever game they came up from Detroit, and hadn't been in the lineup. He's going to go back in the lineup. And I said, well, where do you think your game is or whatever? He goes, listen, I know that I'm learning this game, and I asked him about the big hit that he took. He goes, you know what? I'll live with that. He goes, that's my mistake. I wasn't defending myself, because he got trucked again. I think that's the Flyers are afraid of him getting trucked.
Yeah.
But he said, I don't mind it. That's my game. I'm not going to complain about it. I shouldn't put myself in position sometimes, but if it takes a big hit to make a play, I'm going to take the hit. And that's the mistakes I think that you're going to live with this guy for a while.
Interesting. That is a good conversation. And it's good that he's taking ownership with that, because I think a lot of fans are confused why we're not seeing him more often, especially when he seems to be making an impact on the ice. So unfortunate 3-game losing streak here for the Flyers. And what's been very unfortunate is this power play, because for 2 straight nights, the Flyers had a power play at a key moment against the Kings. That was the first time I've actually been to the Flyers game as a fan, sitting ringside. It was really cool. And you can feel like you hear Lou Nolan say Pico power play. I'm like, all right, here we go. Like, this is their moment to get back in this game. Everyone's standing up. And it is brutal, the power play at a crucial key moment. 2 straight nights against the Kings and the Red Wings, where you have a chance in the third period, down by 1 goal, to get right back in it with a power play. And the power play is brutal. It is like, it's so deflating when something like that happens.
Yeah, it's not just deflating, it's inflating to the other team.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And you're at the end of there's no explanation of, because Michkov's there. Mm-hmm. And, we're not coaches, but you'd think, okay, just run the thing through Michkov, whatever, and let it go that way. There's, you can come up with all sorts of different equations on it, different systems on it, or whatever. Sometimes their second unit's better than their first unit. It's other teams go through it, but it's one thing to have a team that goes through it for a little while, then it starts cooking again. But this has been ridiculously long, and not just the number. Like you mentioned, the time of game when that happens.
Crucial.
When you should be like, if you have a decent power play, that Lou Nolan says that, and you're like, okay, we got a shot here. Now it's like, it doesn't matter. And you're back to because we were so excited early in the year. It's like, okay, Michkov's here. Looks like we've got something cooking here. Who's going to be who's going to run it from up top? Are they even going to run it from up top? What are they going to do? And you've seen one system, then another, and it's again become a real problem mentally. It wears you down I got to think as a player and as a goalie and as a fan to just see that continue. Sometimes I think dumbing down a power play is the best situation. It's almost like you're better shorthanded at times because it's instinctual on what you're doing. So I think they need to less whiteboard sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and more, and
Get
more,
to each off.
and just really, and just see where it goes from there. But it's a horrible feeling also, because there's no there. You know what it's like to ask a guy about something. You can ask about what's going on with your shooting or this, but when you ask about a power play, what you get back at you is a blank stare.
Well, it's truthfully, it's very similar to when we go into the Eagles locker room and we ask them about the slow starts in the first quarter. And it's like, well, if we had the answer, we'd fix it. And it's like, well, yeah, when you put it like that, yeah, you'd fix it by now.
Yeah, but at least the Eagles can say, but we're on our way to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Flyers can't say that.
Flyers can say, well, we're on our way to a rebuild here, and we got to get this thing in order. But it is I got to think as coaches, it's I don't know how embarrassing is the word, or just completely frustrating. There's only a certain amount of systems you can use, really. All it is when you really, when you dumb it down, is find a lane to get across the ice and move the puck across the ice. Just have maybe it's, we've always said it's because they don't have enough skilled guys that can throw sauce. Well, they've got Frost for all of his woes. He can do something like that at times.
Yeah.
Michkov obviously can do that. Konechny. So there are people that should be able to do it. And, you're looking at a defenseman now. Who's going to be that guy? Well, we'll see. York's not there. Zamula looks like he moves side to side. But at some point, it's just players being able to get the puck across the ice.
Right. Well, especially when last year you kind of, I don't want to say dealt with it, but you knew at one point it was going to get better, because the excuse last year was, well, we just don't have the personnel to succeed with this. But you knew Michkov was on the way over. So you're like, all right, when he's here, this will click. It'll feel all better. It'll be fixed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and yeah, we can't keep putting everything. I mean, the kid's going to have some downs. I mean, some periods where, yeah, it's like he can't. Celebrini's had, great games out there as a rookie in San Jose. I mean, you saw what Bedard went through this year. There's going to be some ups and downs, but he's fairly, to my mind, been fairly consistent in his ability to get things going offensively and make plays. But there's going to be -4 nights. Mm-hmm. There's going to be minus whatever nights that he's going to go through that. But a power play is the other thing about a power play. It's where it's the team's CVS where you go to get better. If things aren't going well, you should be able to, once you're in the power play, it's like, okay, here comes the prescription we need to get everybody better. That's where you fatten your statistics. It's where you get your confidence. It's all of that happens. Never mind just getting back in a game, but individually that's what happens. And that really, that has really, really kind of stunted their growth as a team.
Big time. And that is definitely two massive negatives for why the losers, one, are on a 3-game losing streak, but two, you're kind of seeing the issue that we knew would come with this team eventually this season kind of catching up to them here at the midway point. But something that was an issue at the beginning of the season that now is completely not an issue, one, Tyson Forster, but two, Noah Cates. And Noah Cates is a guy that we very truthfully rarely talk about in pre and post game. It's just a guy that doesn't really come up. And maybe that's a good thing, because we don't talk negatively about him. We don't talk positively about him. He's kind of just a guy that is there. Well, Noah Cates is forcing himself into the conversation the way he's been playing the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, he's become a steady player, a third line, however you want to number lines or whatever. Impressive because he was a winger that's learned the center position at the NHL, which is really difficult. And some of the things he has that some of us maybe didn't think. He's got some power moves behind the net, power moves in the corners to come out front, shields the puck fairly well. Makes a lot of money for a guy that, and that's slotted into that spot on a team. So I guess, you could argue he should be producing a little bit more than he had previously. He's become a pro. I guess that's the best way. You want certain guys when you're a coach. Whatever time of the game, you need a pro. I'll put him out there. We know we're going to get. It's going to be a consistent effort. It's going to be a steady effort. Face-offs, he had to learn that to try to get better at that. There's all those things that go with being a center in this league, and to find one that's a pro. So personally for him, he's earned a long spot in the NHL from his play. In order to be very, very valuable, this streak that he's on, or some mini streak that he's on, has to go longer term. That's when you're incredibly valuable, when you can be counted upon defensively and punch in some goals on a pretty consistent basis. And when you're on the ice, think, we could end up +1 on this situation rather than just level coming off of the ice. So yeah, he's been one of their more consistent players, and a guy that when other players dipped a little bit, you can kind of count on him. It's a comfort to see him on the ice. It's like, you know what? Probably bad things aren't going to happen, and there's a good chance something's going to happen.
Yeah, it's credit to him, because he's really turned it around this season, and switching positions one thing, but just becoming the consistency that you hope he could be. So credit to Noah Cates for sure. But the Flyers right now on a 3-game losing streak, losing to the Wild, the Red Wings, the Kings, which leads to 2 very crucial games coming up against teams that you play well against normally. Having the Columbus team come this Saturday, home game in Philadelphia, then you go on the road to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's always a game that's easy to get excited for. But they need to get right. They need to set the tone against a team like Columbus that is having a better season, is right there with you in the standings.
Yeah, these 2 games become now you're going into the Christmas break, no trades time, and you're off for 3 days, whatever it is. So suddenly, you win the Detroit game or you win the LA game. It's like, okay, we're going to be okay going into that break. But not to point out that the worst case scenario, but if you don't win one of these games, you're going into that break. I don't even know if Torts will let them go home after Pittsburgh. We'll see. Well, because at least have a really good effort and turn around that what happened against Los Angeles. Maybe everybody's going to be eyes on the goaltending. The York, see what happens coming into these games. They're really 2 big games in terms of how you're going to feel coming into, I guess, what you would call the second half of the season after the holidays. You don't want to go into that holidays on an awful losing streak and bring that baggage with you. I mean, it's just it's not going home for the holidays with the baggage. It's coming back from them.
Yeah.
And then, what that's like. The ice show comes in town, so you're out of here to get things turned around. So it's like, let's not let this snowball get started going the wrong way and just before the holiday season. To me, it's desperate that you get the home game for sure. The Saturday game against Columbus. That to me is, you got to have this game. You absolutely have to have this game. And you're going to have a team coming in that you embarrass, because Columbus was woeful when the Flyers last played them. They'd come off a road trip and they were just terrible.
No juice.
So, I would think they're not going to have that repeat. So they better be prepared for this. And I'm sure individually, you got team leaders, Konechny, Sanheim, as we mentioned, that just the message has to get through that this slide, we can't let this slide literally send us into an avalanche into the holiday season.
Yeah, you want to stay in the conversation, which the Flyers have done a great job with so far this season. Even when you have these losing streaks, you got to want to get yourself out of it. You can't let it get out of hand. And a couple more games, it is out of hand. So we'll see what happens this week in a crucial game at the Wells Fargo Center on Saturday, and then a big one Monday night as well. Thanks for tuning into South Philly Sauce, an Audacy original brought to you by 94 WIP and Jack Daniels. We'll see you early on next week.